Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Confederate Honey, released in 1940. It's the 281st in the series and it's directed by Friz Freleng. There's currently no restoration available. It was released on Laserdisc, but as we go through the short, I'm pretty sure you can guess why this has not been restored or released just yet. In case you haven't seen this one, it is under copyright, so I can't show you the full thing here on YouTube, but it is a parody of the film Gone with the Wind, which involves Elmer Fudd humorously replacing one of the leading characters in that film. So he basically is a suitor, and he then goes off to war, and we see a few gags revolving around that. First up, you're going to see is a re-edit of the original commentary I did with my good friend Austin Kelly, provided to take that down. And then after that, you'll hear some new thoughts from me. So without further ado, let's get into it. With me today is my good friend Austin Kelly for Friz Freleng's return. Say hi.
Hi, this is... I don't count it as Friz Freleng's return, because why would you want to count this as someone's first film back, really, honestly?
And it's got a very romanticized, and I mean very romanticized version of the South, to the point where, yeah, this is kind of awkward to watch, but at least it's got some good gags, but yeah. What I've noticed in watching this cartoon, and I'll get your thoughts on this in a moment, Austin, is that with this being a romanticized version of the South, it appears that, according to that version, that the African-American folks were just content. They were happy at times with their role in this particular type of society, which we all know the truth.
Kind of a weird portrayal of these, this time period. It's an interesting cartoon. It's definitely very dated, but it does have some decent gags. I feel like it would have held up better if it were in a different time period, maybe with a different war or something. But then, of course, the whole plot would have to change and everything.
We have Elmer Fudd here, and voiced by Arthur Q. Bryan, where apparently some have said that this was originally going to be Egghead.
Well, I've heard people claim we're actually over a decade ago. I don't know if those people still believe those claims are true. They were reliable sources like historian Thad Komorowski and Stephen Hartley. Again, this was a long time ago when they all claimed it, so I'm not sure if they still believe it's true, but I mean, I think it's definitely possible because in the beginning, you see Ben Hardaway gets story credit and Cal Dalton gets the animation credit, which, maybe was their way of making up for the fact that they did a lot of work on this, presumably, but they, of course, weren't going to get credited because Friz Freleng had taken over the unit. I don't know. I'm kind of confused. That looks like Henry Binder.
Henry Binder. Yep. Binder or Binder. I just say both to cover myself. But that's definitely him. But look, this is pretty funny. The drum roll here, and we've got Hugh Herbert, and I think that's Mel Blanc doing the Hugh Herbert impersonation. I'm pretty sure it is. Sounds like him.
Yeah, it's probably him. That trumpet gag, by the way, in this Hugh Herbert scene, this is Cal Dalton's own animation.
But what's interesting is that Mel Blanc would say in later interviews, I don't impersonate anyone, and yet he clearly has a few times. I mean, granted, this was probably a very tiny thing in a mountain of work that he did at the time, so it's easily forgotten. But yeah, I just thought it was pretty funny that he would say that. And this looks like a rotoscope, this looks like it's taken from Old Glory. That one little part there, with the horse.
It might have been. It was definitely the same model of the... Maybe they had this... Maybe what happened was they rotoscoped a different scene from the same film. That might have been what happened there. But I feel like it would have been a lot better if maybe just one team of directors committed to it. I feel like its messy kind of plot and inconsistencies may have been a part of the fact that this was picked up by one director after being started by another team of directors. But that's just pure speculation, honestly. But I feel like it's just okay in any case.
But I have to say, with this short, I do like the punchline at the end. I mean, you can sort of see it coming because it was kind of set up anyway, where Elmer returns and, he just wants his parking thing stamped and that's it. I would say You Ought to Be in Pictures is probably his first true return. I know he has one more short after this one. Before that, I think The Hardship of Miles Standish, but yeah, it's possible he's just finishing up with the other director's work and then he's starts fresh with You Ought to Be in Pictures, but that's just a theory of mine, so. So those were my original thoughts, along with my good friend Austin Kelly, of course. I just wanted to go through a few other things in relation to this short, as a lot of things were definitely missed at the time. We've already mentioned the whole Elmo and Egghead thing. I think it was just a mix-up of the different designs and the two characters being similar and all that. I'm not going to get into that in this review. So the title is a play on Confederate money, and there really was a currency that was used by the Southern states called the Confederate States dollar, and it was introduced just before the Civil War, and naturally after the Civil War it was basically worthless, and these days it's more of just collector's items. I'm not going to go into the whole history on the Confederate States dollar, otherwise my editor will end up killing me. Now, it was already mentioned in the commentary that this is Frizz's return to the studio after a period of time at MGM, where he was notably not happy with how things went and regretted leaving. So what would happen is that Hardaway Dalton, they would start this short. I think they might have also started The Hardship of Miles Standish. Not sure on that one, but either way, Freeling comes back and he finishes this short. And Hardaway goes back to the story department, but not for too long because he leaves and then goes to Walter Lantz Studio and he plays a part in the creation of Woody Woodpecker. Cal Dalton, he goes back in animation and apparently he preferred it there, and he stays there until about 1947 or thereabouts. So just to put things into perspective, so when this short was actually made, so you had Gone with the Wind, and that was a best-selling novel, and then it ended up being made into a film, which was a huge blockbuster. In fact, up until recently, it was considered one of the finest classics ever made. However, recently, it's been reevaluated, and I'm not going to get into the whole debate over Gone with the Wind, whether it should remain as one of the classics or not. All I know is that it's a very long film. I quite like it, but I can see why some might find it problematic. In any case, you've got the parodies in this one where you've got the Scarlett O'Hara being Crimson O'Hare Oil, and you've got Elmer Fudd as Red Butler, and in this short it's Net Cutler, so it's definitely a play on that, and it's easy to see why. Again, the film was a major blockbuster at the time. But let's take a look at this short from start to finish with all the things I missed, and I did actually miss quite a bit. So, of course, it's set in the Old South, and you got the camera pan, and, of course, you got to see the Kentucky bluegrass. Ha ha, right? I mean, in case you weren't aware, bluegrass is a style of music, and that originated in Kentucky. And yes, we see 1861 BC, before Seabiscuit. Again, ha ha, and Seabiscuit was a famous horse at the time. So as we pan over, we see a rather large house, and we see the plantation owner, Colonel O'Hare Oil. Ha ha. Of course, it's a pun on O'Hara. I mean, I guess Hardaway, who is credited for the story here, just loves these silly puns, doesn't he? But anyway, so we see the Colonel, he's blue-skinned, he's referred to as a blue blood, and in case you're wondering, a blue blood is someone that's from aristocratic or noble birth, and is basically a southern blue blood. And of course, what does he sing? Am I Blue? Am I blue? Am I blue? Again, ha ha. I do like Mel Blanc's vocals in this scene, especially when he does the whole Sold American, the Lucky Strike cigarette ad campaign, which has been done in quite a few gags in Looney Tunes around this time, where the character would speak really, really fast and then say at the end, Sold American. In this case, he includes Sold to a Nation. So it's a joke that's lost to time, but I still think it's pretty funny anyway.
The Colonel is the owner of Rich Tobacco Plantation. Tell us about your tobacco, Colonel. Sold to the National.
So now we head over to where the actual workers are, and at this point in time, they would actually be considered slaves, as this takes place just before the Civil War. We see a reference to Uncle Tom's Bungalow, and that is a very well-known and controversial book, and it's already been adapted as a Looney Tune. It's one of the Censored 11 shorts directed by Tex Avery. So we see in the cotton fields, the main reason why this one probably won't get a restoration, and they're apparently the envy of all the South, according to the narrator. Okay, I mean, this is definitely very romanticized, I can tell you that. If the conditions wouldn't be like this, but anyway. And in case you're wondering, the song that's being sung is Old Black Joe, and the chorus singers are Paul Taylor's Sportsman, and that's from Keith Scott's wonderful Cartoon Voices book. And I will let you guys know who voices what in here, but the research all comes from Keith Scott, and thanks to him, we got so much information on that front, and it's absolutely fantastic. So we see some gags which are very eye-roll worthy, especially one involving a very lazy-looking black person just laying there. A child passes him cotton, and he just puts it in. Sure, the timing of it is quite good. It actually is well done. But yes, it's the whole thing about you can't get too ambitious by giving 2 pieces of cotton instead of 1, implying that this particular slave is especially lazy. Yeah, it's an awful quote-unquote joke here. But anyway, let's move past that now and go back into the actual main plantation building where we meet the colonel's daughter, and it's Crimson O'Hare oil, and it's not Scarlett O'Hara in this case, but anyway. So we hear that she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Chef's kiss to this wonderful dad's joke. I admit I did chuckle at this. I know my editor's probably groaning at seeing this one, but I thought it was quite funny. Keith Scott's actually not sure on who voices her, but he's put a question mark on Mary Shipp. Hopefully some information will come out eventually confirming who actually does her voice here. So she takes the spoon out of her mouth and she's like, hurry, hurry, I want to look my best. And she looks, rather glamorous. And then we see the comparison with one of the housemaids or house slaves, whatever you want to call her, voiced by Sarah Burner in this case. You can see the contrast here. It's rather terrible. But let's move on to the parking lot that this plantation happens to have. So a lot of these potential suitors now come and see her, and she turns them all down. She has no interest in any of them. And we then see Alma Fudd, who is Ned Cutler, which is a parody of Brett Butler, as I mentioned before. And again, it's just a weird parody. If you've actually seen Gone with the Wind like I have, it's rather amusing if you actually know the reference, but thankfully you don't really need to know the reference. You just need to know that Alma's definitely miscast here, I can tell you that. And we get some wonderful timing in relation to the horse entering to the parking lot. And yes, even the whole servant having to, quote-unquote, park the horse. Yeah, it's cringy, but hey, the timing at least is pretty good. So we're back inside the building, and Elmer, he's holding onto his hat, and he's going to say something very important to her, and this is the setup of a wonderful punchline that we're going to get at the very end of the short, which, okay, we've kind of spoiled it in the commentary portion, but whatever. It's still pretty good that we actually were thinking about how to set up the punchline at the end. But Alfred G. Bryant's voice here is amazing, where he's like, could you?
Clemson, I come to ask you...
Yes, go on.
If you,
Yes.
Well, I know I'm irresponsible, but...
Yes, go on, Ned, say it.
Could you...
And we then hear a big explosion, and the narrator announces, then came the war. And by the way, I should have mentioned earlier, but John Deering does the voice of the narrator here, and he does a pretty good job. So we hear a whole bunch of Confederate troops marching past the plantation fields, looking all patriotic. Again, I know it's problematic, but anyway, we'll just go with this, of course. We hear I Wish I Play in Dixie play in the background, very patriotic, and Alma says, my country calls, I must join the regiment. Love the Alma Fudd voice that is all over this. And then we get the beginning of another little gag that we see play out all throughout the short, where we see that slave in the parking lot saying, hey, mister, you forgot your horse, voiced by Mel Blanc here. And we see that... yeah, Crimson waves goodbye, saying, goodbye, Ned, I'll be waiting for you. So, we've set everything up, and now we're on to the war. We see some protesters with Union signs, and it's a play on the fact that the North were the Union, and it's also a play on the fact that there were so many unions in Hollywood at the time that were protesting for better working conditions, and soon after this short was released, a major strike over at Disney would occur, which would change the trajectory of certain parts in the animation industry. So we see that a Union officer is inspecting all the troops, and he refers to Stonewall Jackson as Stonewall Jackson, of course. He also mentions southpaw, and that's a reference to a left-handed boxer that leads with the right hand. We then see a few interesting looking troops here, and they're all caricatures. So you've got Henry Binder, you've got Tubby Millar, you got Ray Katz and animator Paul J. Smith. And naturally, you don't even need to know who they are. They just look kind of weird, but they sort of had the faces that were ripe for caricature. But I do like this gag, how he got this officer saying, now I want you to get out there and give. And he tosses the cigar and they just fight over this cigar. Because why not, right?
In this one, we get to meet the South in the Cotton Bowl. Now I want you to get out there and give.
And the music sequence here is the battle cry for freedom. So the next sequence shows just what was missing in those Hardaway Dalton shorts for the most part, and that's Friz Freeling's timing. This whole bit with the cannons, so it starts off rather serious, we see some cannons firing, and then it all just goes to the timing of the music. We then see a Confederate troop blow his trumpet, and then all of a sudden it just turns into a little musical riff, and they play some jazz, because why not, right? This sequence is probably my favorite in the whole thing, just showcasing Friz's wonderful timing. So now we're inside camp headquarters for the Confederacy, and we see a parody of Hugh Herbert. I don't know why they went with him, but whatever. He definitely was a unique personality. He had this weird quirks where we go, woo-woo, and he's been parodied a lot in Looney Tunes for that reason, but why here, I don't know. But Mel Blanc does a pretty good impression, which, as I mentioned in the commentary, it's kind of weird that later on he says, oh, I never did impressions, when he actually did. But anyway, that's fine, given how many voices he actually did over his career. And speaking of voices, apparently the aide that was here in the tent was also voiced by Arthur Bryan as well, but in the sped up voice. So maybe it was just, hey, here's a few lines, can you just do it for us? And that's that. So then we see a scene that looks rather serious, but we got Elmer, he's by a cannon, and they decide to fire a cannon, but it ends up being like a pinball machine. The timing is great, but I just shrugged at it. Maybe this was like one of those cheesy Hardaway type jokes, but whatever. And then we're back at the parking lot where we see the same slave just sitting there waiting for Elmer to return, which will end up having a nice little payoff at the very end. And then we're back at the plantation where we see that O'Hare Royal is sitting at the porch once again, and he's listening to the Civil War on the radio, which is completely ridiculous, but whatever, we go with it, because radio, of course, wasn't invented at the time. We hear a radio announcer voiced by Jim Bannon, and he just talks as though it's like a football or baseball match or something. But anyway, pretty amusing.
Win again today. Other scores, Brooklyn 5, Cincinnati 3. All others were rained out.
Those dead bun Yankees.
Then we see, for a brief moment at least, a rather serious kind of scene where Elmer is reading a letter by Crimson. He misses her, and of course that she will have to wait for him to return longer than he thought he was at the time. And in another very groan-worthy quote-unquote joke, we see a fireworks shoot up, and usually you see in a lot of shorts Eat at Joe's, but this is of course a little bit different, where it's after the battle, eat Southern fried chicken at Mammy's shack. Ha ha. Okay, whatever. Moving on. Then we're back to Crimson, where she's burning a little light through the window, and that ends up being a huge beam coming from the plantation. That's some candle, I will say that, which was pretty amusing. Some have said that this animation is taken from I Wanna Be a Sailor, which was directed by Tex Avery. Could be. And in a gag that feels a little bit out of place in this short, they reused footage from Old Glory, that whole rotoscope bit, and we hear Mel Blanc yelling, "The British are coming, to arms, to arms." Why? I don't know. But I do like at the end, we hear as the sequence ends up fading out, it's like with a bang, bang.
The British are coming! To arms! To arms! To arms! The British are coming! With a bang, bang.
Again, the gag's out of place, but Mel Blanc's delivery at least is kind of amusing here. And now we see a montage of the battle, and essentially, we were at the start of the Civil War, so of course everything just continues on from 1862, and it finishes up in 1865 when the war ended. And we even see the continuation of that joke with the same barking attendant boy waiting for Alma to return the horse. But anyway, so now it's apparently peacetime, and we see some quite exaggerated moments with birds now making nests in the cannons and that sort of thing. And we see the soldiers marching back home, which I believe is reused animation from earlier on in this short where they were marching off to battle. Now they're marching back. They just would have flipped it around. And naturally, yeah, this disguised the fact of what the Confederate soldiers truly looked like after all that fighting over the years, but we're not going to get into that. It's just kind of weird. So now we're going to head towards the end of the short, where we got this massive build-out all throughout, where Crimson has been waiting all this time. So many candles have been used over the time. She's waiting impatiently. Although I do have to ask, what is that patch on the rear of her dress? I don't know if that's referencing anything, so let me know in the comments if you know what that patch might be referring to. But we hear a knock on the door, we see Alma, and we think that he's finally going to propose to her. She's all excited, and this entire thing is, would you just validate my ticket? The end. I gotta say, with this short, it is rather amusing. Yes, it's problematic in a lot of ways, which I've already discussed, I'm not going to get into again, but the fact it has all this build-up in the entire short, and then it has this wonderful punchline at the very end, I thought it was pretty good. Is this one of Frizz's best shorts? No. But you know what? It actually shows what was missing in those Cal Dalton and Ben Hardaway shorts for the most part. Friz Freleng, even in his lesser works such as this, always had a strong sense of timing and strong sense of direction. So, short, look, it gets 7 out of 10 because I was actually amused by a lot of it. And again, I recognize it's problematic, and I recognize that sadly it won't be restored, even though I think it should, like every short. But anyway, at least now it's all been covered, and Friz is now back at the studio, so now I can start covering his 1940s shorts. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
I want to ask you,
Oh, yes.
would you validate my ticket?